Have you ever wondered what the biggest gun ever built was? Forget what you've seen in movies or video games. The real king of cannons is a weapon so monstrous, so unbelievably huge, that its story sounds like something straight out of a legend. Today, we're diving deep into the history of the Schwerer Gustav, or Heavy Gustav, the largest and heaviest piece of artillery ever used in combat. This isn't just a big gun. This was a city-destroying behemoth on railway tracks. The story of the Gustav gun begins in the mid-1930s. Germany was planning its assault on France, but there was a massive problem standing in their way: the Maginot Line. This was a chain of concrete fortifications, obstacles and weapon installations that France had built along its borders with Germany and Italy. It was considered impenetrable, a modern marvel of defensive engineering. The German High Command knew that a conventional attack would be costly and likely fail. They needed something bigger, something that could punch through feet of reinforced concrete and steel like it was paper. So, in 1936, they approached the renowned German steel and arms manufacturer, Krupp. The order was simple, yet audacious: build a gun capable of destroying the forts of the Maginot Line. The requirements were mind-boggling. The shell had to be able to penetrate 7 meters of reinforced concrete or 1 full meter of steel armor plate, all from a distance beyond the range of French artillery. The engineers at Krupp, led by Erich Müller, took on this monumental challenge. What they designed would push the very limits of engineering. The sheer scale of the Gustav gun is almost impossible to comprehend. Imagine a weapon that was 47 meters long. That's nearly half the length of a football field. It stood over 4 stories high and weighed a staggering 1,350 tons. That's heavier than a naval destroyer. This wasn't a weapon you could just tow behind a truck. It required its own dedicated railway to move. In fact, it needed 2 parallel sets of railway tracks just to support its immense weight. Assembling the Gustav was a Herculean task in itself. It required a crew of nearly 250 men to put it together, a process that took 3 full days. And that's not even counting the thousands of other personnel, including engineers, railway troops and anti-aircraft battalions, needed to operate and protect this colossal asset. The ammunition for this beast was just as insane. The Gustav fired 2 main types of shells. The first was a high-explosive shell weighing 4.8 tons. That's the weight of an adult elephant. The second was an even heavier 7.1-ton concrete-piercing shell, designed specifically for fortress busting. These shells were so massive they stood as tall as 2 men. Just to load one of these projectiles into the 800mm caliber barrel required a special crane and a team of soldiers working in perfect sync. When fired, this monster could hurl a shell over a distance of 47 kilometers, or about 29 miles. From that distance, you wouldn't even be able to see the target, relying on aerial reconnaissance and complex calculations to aim. The recoil from a single shot was so powerful it would shake the ground like a small earthquake. Ironically, by the time the Gustav gun was ready for service in 1941, it was already a weapon without a purpose. The German army had bypassed the Maginot Line in 1940 using their blitzkrieg tactics, rendering the line strategically irrelevant. The giant cannon, built at an astronomical cost, had missed its own party. For a while, it seemed like the Gustav would become nothing more than a very, very expensive piece of military trivia. But its story wasn't over. In 1942, the German army was laying siege to the heavily fortified city of Sevastopol on the Crimean Peninsula. The city's defenses included massive coastal forts, some built into the bedrock itself, with gun turrets protected by thick concrete and steel. This was the perfect and ultimately only job for the Gustav gun. The deployment to Sevastopol was a massive logistical operation. The gun was broken down into several parts and transported on 25 separate railway cars. Once on site, the painstaking process of assembly began. Over several weeks, under the constant threat of Soviet air raids, The crews worked tirelessly to bring the giant to life. Finally, in June 1942, the Gustav was ready to fire. The first target was a group of coastal forts. The thunderous roar of the Gustav echoed across the battlefield. The massive shells soared through the air before slamming into their targets with unimaginable force. Forts that had withstood weeks of conventional bombing were systematically shattered. One of the most incredible feats was the destruction of an underground ammunition magazine, located 30 meters beneath the seabed, protected by 10 meters of concrete. A single concrete-piercing shell from the Gustav punched through the earth and the concrete, detonating the magazine in a cataclysmic explosion. Over the course of the siege of Sevastopol, the Gustav gun fired a total of 48 shells. It was instrumental in breaking the city's defenses, leading to its eventual fall. But this was also its first and last major combat operation. The gun's limitations were becoming glaringly obvious. It was incredibly slow to move and assemble, making it a vulnerable target for air attacks. It required a massive support crew and consumed enormous resources. Furthermore, the immense stress of firing such huge shells meant the barrel had a very short lifespan and needed to be recalibrated and eventually replaced. After Sevastopol, the Gustav was moved to the outskirts of Leningrad, possibly for another siege, but the attack was cancelled. Its sister gun, named Dora, was also deployed but saw very little, if any, combat. As the tide of the war turned against Germany, the Gustav gun became a liability. The era of static siege warfare was over, replaced by fast-moving mobile battles. There was simply no place for such a slow, cumbersome weapon. In the final days of the war, to prevent them from falling into Allied hands, both the Gustav and Dora guns were destroyed by the Germans themselves. The remnants were discovered by American troops in a forest in Bavaria, silent, rusted monuments to a bygone era of military thinking. The story of the Schwerer Gustav is a fascinating lesson in military engineering and strategy. It represents the peak of bigger is better philosophy, a testament to what humans can build when pushed to the absolute limit, yet it also serves as a cautionary tale. It was a weapon of incredible power, but its impracticality and immense cost made it a strategic dead end. It was a dinosaur, an engineering marvel, made obsolete by the very war it was built to fight. Today, nothing remains of the Gustav gun, except for a few surviving shells in museums and the incredible photographs that document its sheer size. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the biggest, but the smartest. The blitzkrieg tactics that bypassed the Maginot Line proved far more effective than any cannon, no matter how large. What do you think? Was the Gustav gun a brilliant feat of engineering or a colossal waste of resources? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks for joining me on this journey into military history. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the most incredible machines ever built. We'll see you in the next one.